Hello and welcome to Real Parenting for the Sensitive Mom, the podcast for moms who feel everything and still show up. You're the mom who cries during commercials, overthinks bedtime routines, and feels literally everything your kids feel. Welcome, you found your people. I'm Adrienne Bishop, your co-host and parenting coach.
And I'm Leah Andreoni, your co-host and family therapist. Today, you'll hear us talk about being highly sensitive, what it is, why it's important for you as a mom to know if you are and if your kids are.
My name is Adrienne Bishop, and I have been a parenting coach for highly sensitive families for 6 years. I'm a highly sensitive person, and so are all three of my children. They are 14, 11, and 7. I'm also a trained integrative hypnotist, which is a tool I find incredibly helpful as a parenting coach and as a sensitive, anxious person myself. I am a former opera singer and a music teacher, and I'm getting my master's degree in clinical and counseling psychology to get my LPC. I've been married for almost 20 years.
And I'm Adrienne's co-host, Leah Andreoni. I am a certified perinatal mental therapist working with women across the motherhood spectrum, from family planning to grandmotherhood. I have been a therapist in various capacities for over 15 years and have supported sensitive moms within their relationships and parenting journeys. I own Rising Sun Therapy and Rising Wellness, where we use connection and creativity to offer holistic healing. I have 2 sensitive children, along with a deeply feeling husband who I've been married to for almost 17 years.
So I'm curious, Leah, why did you say yes to doing this podcast with me? And what do you want everyone to know about why you're excited about it?
There's always more information that I want to share with clients. However, I also understand that overloading the moms with all the information in one session can be too overwhelming. And that is exactly what we're trying to manage in our day-to-day lives. So this platform allows us to have deeper conversations between us, to get to know each other, to get to those questions that may still need to be answered. And then we can offer different perspectives as you come from a coaching background. I have a therapy background, our own highly sensitive experiences with ourselves and our kids, and teach everyone how we work with clients so listeners can take what they need and share with others who may benefit. How about you? Why were you interested in doing this and talking more about sensitive moms and parenting?
Yeah, well, like you, I have been sensitive my whole life, and I always felt really different. And I felt like every day was a struggle. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it really did feel really difficult. I was shy, I was anxious, and I just worried a lot more than most people that I knew. And I just thought something was really wrong with me. My self-esteem was pretty low when I was younger. And I think the way that I coped was kind of to feel like I was in a bubble. Like it was almost like I was just dissociating a little bit, especially in high school when things got really intense. And I moved around a ton, which didn't really help. I feel like sensitive people really struggle with change. So that was a really impactful situation for me every time it happened. But when I discovered that I was highly sensitive, which happened in my 30s, which was pretty late, I feel, everything just started to make sense. I really felt like I made sense. And since then, my shame has gone down, my self-esteem has gone up, and I've really wanted to help other people feel the same way because I knew how impactful it was for me. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, because I wanted this information to be out there. All the things that I've learned within the last 15 years and the last 6 years of coaching, it's just been so helpful to me. My goal was to make sure that everyone out there that was in the same situation with themselves and or their children had this to use, this information to fall back on and to have if they need it. So that's why I'm here. I want to be community for sensitive people. I want to be support for sensitive people and to let all of us know that we're not crazy. We're actually amazing. Very amazing. Yes. And very necessary in this world, which you will find out as we go through this.
To start, a highly sensitive person is someone whose nervous system is wired to process things more deeply. It's a lot more sensitive, and it's going to be able to pick out information from our environment and hopefully be able to incorporate it, but it can sometimes be too much. And when that happens, that's when we're overstimulated and we're having these reactions. Psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron coined the term, and her research shows that about 15 to 20% of the population is highly sensitive. I feel like that's a pretty big number. And I do know, working with a lot of the moms, they don't even know that they're a highly sensitive person. Mm-hmm. They just know that the world is a lot and they don't know what to do with it. And also to understand it's not a disorder. There's no diagnosis for it. It's a temperament. And like you said, the world needs us. It needs the sensitive people. And we're going to find out what that looks like and then be able to support the moms.
So it shows up in 4 key ways. So Dr. Elaine Aron actually uses the acronym DOES, D-O-E-S. And if you want to have further information from her, she has a beautiful website called The Highly Sensitive Person. You can go on there and actually take the test to see if you are highly sensitive. So that's something to look into. So the acronym DOES, D-O-E-S, the D is for deep processing, meaning that we think things through really deeply and sometimes to the point of overthinking. And actually it shows up in the way of even slow response. So sometimes sensitive people will be asked a question, but they take time to respond because they're thinking through all the possibilities. This happens also with decisions, as we'll talk about soon. You're constantly thinking about everything that could go wrong, which is a negative bent, which I think is a very common issue for highly sensitive people, but also can be an advantage. So we have to kind of look at it both ways. Overstimulation is the only negative, is what Elaine Aron says. This is the only negative thing about being highly sensitive, is that we get overstimulated. Too much noise, too many people, too much to do, also over arousal of our actual nervous system. So learning how to manage those things is really important. The E stands for high empathy, feeling things deeply, and also feeling others' emotions, feeling other people's energy, which, as you know, if you're here, you probably noticed that, and it can be very difficult. It can be hard to separate yourself from not only other people, but your own children emotionally, which can make parenting that much harder. And the S is for sensory sensitivity, which is strong reactions to lights, sounds, textures, caffeine, medication. And this can be not necessarily the sensory processing disorder, but just sensitivity. So you can go into disorder, but typically highly sensitive people are just sensitive. And you don't need to have every single aspect that I just talked about to be highly sensitive. We all have different combinations of this trait. And actually, sometimes you have just one really strong trait or version of this trait, and that's all you need. You don't need to have everything. So Leah's going to talk about some examples just in general about what maybe highly sensitive people might experience.
For example, others may be deeply affected by violence or stress on TV. I do tell my clients frequently, get off of the news because it can be too much and that information is not a priority most of the time. You can also get really irritated on loud restaurants. Noise can be so overstimulating, you may not be able to focus on what the person in front of you is talking about because you're attuned to everything else going on. Noticing the tag on your shirt. We have kids that can't stand tags or they can't stand how their socks feel. Even the type of fabric. I know my kids, they will only buy a certain type of fabric, how it feels, even colors most of the time. And for moms, thinking of bras, tight jeans, tight clothing, you want it off. And then you're getting overwhelmed by these sensations. And you're also getting overwhelmed when you don't have a plan for the day, especially in the summer if you're home with the kids all day and all they're doing is asking for the screen time, for the snacks. Can we do this? Can we go in the pool? And then before you know it, your kids are going to melt down. And because you're sensitive to their needs, you're going to know that before. You're going to see the cues a lot sooner than maybe your partner, more likely than your in-laws. So if you're trying to manage a meltdown before it happens, you can get a response from somebody else saying, oh, what are you talking about? They're not melting down yet. You're like, but they're going to. And you want to prevent that. So it's a lot of pressure on your shoulders to manage that. All of it is going to make you feel emotionally exhausted. You're going to be exhausted after talking to a friend who's going through a hard time because you're taking on those emotions. So you're going to be able to be there for them and listen and provide empathy, but you're going to need to have time to feel rejuvenated and reflect for yourself afterwards.
And it's interesting with like the friend going through a hard time. For me, I've learned how to help myself process some of that so that I can kind of release it. But before I learned that, I was actually feeling what they were feeling and it didn't really go away. And I constantly would think about them, or I would think about like how I could help them or how I could solve their problem. And that's one of the things I noticed for a lot of highly sensitive people. We're feeling everything everybody's feeling. So what we really want to do is solve all of it for them. So we're always going to be the fixer. And it's just because we don't want to feel what they're feeling. Really, that's the deep-seated reason. It's not that we think there's something wrong with each person that we're dealing with or people can't be upset. It's just that we're taking it on. And so for us to feel better, we're like, oh, I know, I'll just fix it. But in reality, that's not realistic because we're basically doing the work for people and people don't want that. It doesn't work. So then it just becomes really, really exhausting. So yeah, for me, I was always really sensitive to undergarments. Like I would come home and just take off my bra like immediately. And I still do that. I hate them. And it's just those kinds of things where jeans were just not something I wore as a kid ever, ever. And every time I hear somebody like that's highly sensitive, they're like, I can wear jeans. And I'm like, well, you're an anomaly. I mean, it does happen. It does happen. People sometimes aren't physically sensitive. But I'm curious, Leah, what have you experienced yourself as a highly sensitive mom that maybe are similar to what we talked about or a little different, and or some of the things your clients have brought to you that have been like a red flag for you to be like, oh, that sounds like a highly sensitive.
Yeah, definitely. I think because I didn't even start working with a lot of moms until I became a mom. So, and I started to see myself in them and really be able to connect with them, be like, yeah, I know, I get it. So the way my brain pieces it out, it's kind of the emotional and then the physical. And with the emotional sensitivity, that is the deep empathy. We're going to feel other people's feelings. We're going to be able to react to our babies, especially for new moms, so much, even more. We're going to have to react to the baby's cry because it's going to affect us physically. And it's going to pierce almost like our hearts.
Yeah.
There's a knife going through our hearts, and it's going to make us feel irritable, almost rageable, especially if we have a colicky baby.
Yeah.
And we can't calm down the baby, then our nervous system is going to be activated all of the time.
I remember the crying out with my daughter, and I did that method, and it was basically torture. I had to put headphones on. I felt so bad. And like, I know some of you may not agree with that. It was just what I did at the time because I needed sleep. But it's one of those things where I look back and I'm like, that was torture. And I didn't really do it the right way because I couldn't stand it. And then there was one time where wanted to wean her and she lost it. And I was crying. She was crying. It was really, really bad. And it was like everything she was feeling, I was feeling. And I feel like that does make sense. It actually gives us a little bit of an evolutionary advantage to be super responsive to our babies. Yes. And some people are a little bit less, which doesn't mean there's anything wrong. But if we're so in tune to our children, that can be an advantage in a way, but it can make it really hard to manage ourselves during that time.
Especially as women and moms, if we didn't learn how to manage our own emotions before now, learning the process while you're trying to help your kids can be a very daunting one, and you need as much support as possible.
And I think sometimes when you have the kid, you realize, oh gosh, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew how to help myself and manage myself. And it's a little bit more difficult than I thought.
Yes, it is. It is, because evolution says we have to react to our babies. That's why the cry is so jarring for most of us. We have to, because we have to protect our babies.
Definitely.
But when we're highly sensitive, we kind of go into overprotection because we feel it so much more. But this can result in more increased chance of postpartum depression and anxiety because our moods are more affected. The anxiety is going to lead to over analysis of our decisions, which is what you mentioned before. We're going to be stuck sometime in analysis paralysis. And it's also hard as new moms to let go of some of that control, even to our partners, to let them make the decision.
Oh, yeah.
Very difficult.
That's a big one.
Very difficult. Yes. Because we know what's right. We are biologically there. Partners are too, but our bodies are literally responding.
And also feeling in control helps with the anxiety, because like the more you're in control, you're like, I can feel better. But in reality, you're never really in control. So it's this paradox. But yeah, it feels like it does help. It will help.
So with the mood swings, with the anxiety increasing, you might have more than average tearfulness with definitely sadness, but also joy. You're going to feel the emotions even more. And also with new moms in the first 2 years, your hormones are still not in balance. So you might feel the hormonal imbalance even more than a mom that's not highly sensitive and react to that a little bit more. So the mood swings and the anxiety and things can lead to mom rage, which is a real thing. Being so irritable that you're just reacting. And it's to take away that shame, because there's nothing wrong with you to have that strong reaction. You're just feeling too much.
Yeah, I was going to say the overstimulation, which you're going to talk about in a minute, also leads me to like very strong irritability, where let's just say there's clutter, there's too much noise, and it's the end of the day and I have to do something and I can't focus on it. It's really automatic to feel super, super irritated and then be like, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling this way? What is the big deal? It's just a couple toys on the floor. Like, that's where
Mhm.
my brain goes a lot of times. But
It's not just a couple toys. It's your environment affects you more than someone who can walk into a cluttered room and be like, I don't barely see it. You're going to see it. You're going to feel every crumb on the bottom of your foot and have a reaction. I can't walk around my house without socks or shoes on. I will not, because I don't want to step on any of the dirt and feel that under my feet. So having an environment that's more picked up is better. But if you have a newborn and a toddler, you're
yeah.
never going to have a clean house. And that's going to affect how you feel and increase the overstimulation. And especially if you have more than one child, being touched out. That's a huge trigger for overstimulation and just having that fight or flight response. If I want to get away, don't touch me, don't look at me. I can't handle it. So that also goes to the physical sensitivities, but also the physical sensitivity of sleep deprivation. I was extremely sleep deprived with my first and didn't know that I was going to feel like that, but I couldn't think, I couldn't smile. I was pretty shut down and feeling numb. Didn't know about that with my first, wasn't really working with moms a lot. So I just was numb. And because of that sleep deprivation, I wasn't able to interact with him as much as I wanted to, right? And I've had to work to release that guilt. After 13 years, I've had to
You
work that
didn't
because
have
I
the
didn't have
energy.
support, didn't have the energy, I didn't have anything at that point.
Wow.
The physical sensitivity to sleep deprivation, your body's responding that, and also having more body awareness. If you're more aware of your body, you're going to have maybe a harder time nursing, especially if nursing's difficult. You might have the response of getting irritable during nursing, which is more rare, but you can have that. And if you're touched out, you don't want the baby on you.
Yeah.
So that's hard. So, but with all that, we do have the mom guilt that comes when we're craving alone time because we need that, right? Highly sensitive people need alone time more than the average person to recharge. And you don't get that as a new mom. It's gone. Especially if you're nursing around the clock, it's gone. And just another couple things is being really affected by others' opinions, because then you're going to compare. And I tell my moms all the time, take a break from social media, right?
Totally.
Unless your feed is really cultivated, you need to take a break so you're not comparing yourself, because those comparisons are going to lead to feeling shame, feeling not good enough, feeling like I can't handle this. I'm not doing what everybody else is doing. And that self-criticism is going to make so much more problems, because we also tend to hold that in and not share it as much, even with our partners, which just feeds shame. So when you said you were able to let go of that shame once you found out, I'm grateful that you found that, because it's so debilitating sometimes, and then you can feel isolated, and that just makes everything so much worse.
Just like seeing on the social media feed the perfect house that's clean, or the babies that are in the beautiful outfits, or like the perfect picture that they somehow managed to get to the park in the fall and make this beautiful photograph. And you're like, I can't even get out of bed in the morning and like get some clothes on or even take a shower.
Exactly. Remember, social media is not real. We are living real lives, and sometimes it's a lot more difficult than what we see. But Adrienne, since you work with parents and kids, discussing all our sensitivities, I'm sure we're triggered by our kids. Tell us a little bit about what it's like as a parent, and how does it show up with the kids, and how are we responding?
Yeah, so that's so interesting that you were talking about the triggering, because that's where the hypnosis comes in. I can help people kind of move away from feeling that way, which has been a huge help, because this is a big thing that highly sensitive moms come to me with, and dads too. But the idea of not only when they were kids, them being sensitive created some resentment. Like if their parents didn't treat them the way they thought they needed to be treated, they hold resentment around that. And then they can go either direction. They can be tougher on their sensitive kid, or they can actually be over coddling them. So like really understanding like, oh, I'm being triggered because I thought I needed more validation as a child. And so now I'm really sensitive to like when my kid is emotional, making sure I validate that. So like this is a really important thing to understand when you're parenting a highly sensitive kid and you're highly sensitive. How are these cause and effects kind of affecting your parenting and how you're dealing with your children? situation? And is it something you want to choose to keep doing? Like I have a client that currently says, my mom had no tolerance for my sensitivity. And my goal is to be incredibly supportive of my kid who is very sensitive. And so I need to buffer between her and my child because she doesn't think that I'm doing the right thing. And so it becomes not only just your issue, but also maybe an intergenerational challenge when your parents come over and they see that you're doing something different. They feel that maybe they did something wrong. So it's so complicated and intricate, all of these challenges. And I think that that's why it's so really helpful to have support in these situations, to have someone help you parse through, hey, sounds like what this is going on. And this might be why you're feeling that way. However, that's their stuff. This is your stuff. And just kind of parse through that. That was a little bit of a tangent. But when we get back to how do you know that your kid might be highly sensitive, or how do you go into that rabbit hole and try to figure it out? Well, one of the most common ways that it shows up on the emotional sides for kids is anxiety. You will see really strong separation anxiety sometimes, like that lasts longer than developmentally appropriate. Like usually maybe 18 months is the really big separation anxiety time, but you're seeing it into kindergarten. I actually had separation anxiety, or I don't know what you want to call it, but homesickness when I was in college. Horrible homesickness. And like, it feels weird to say that, but that's how I felt. I mean, I was miserable for like a month or two, and then I finally adjusted, but it was so strong. It was so strong. Again, another not feeling like I'm normal. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be by myself? Why do I need to be home? But again, it's the change. It's the lack of the caregiver. I definitely relied on my mom a lot for just being there for me emotionally. That got taken away. It's just one of those things where you will see anxiety in different areas where it might get in the way of them functioning more than other kids. Sometimes it can go up and down, it can flow, it can ebb and flow. And especially in younger kids, you'll see it. As they get older, I don't know if you've seen this, Leah, but anxiety tends to drop, especially if they start to have tools. If you've worked with them or you've had someone work with them, if they have tools, their anxiety will drop as they get older.
If you're able to find the tools, find the support. A lot of my moms have been in therapy, and sometimes they have the support, but they also come back into therapy when their kids are having a hard time because they kind of forget.
Yes, right? Exactly.
Because now they're managing, like you said, their own stuff and then the kids' stuff.
Yes.
Right?
And so when your kid has anxiety, you're going to probably feel the same. You're going to feel anxious for them and you're going to want to solve it. But the idea is that solving it is not the idea. Like that's not the solution. So kind of knowing how to manage your kids' anxiety can help them through it, can be huge for them and helping them have the tools. Also low frustration tolerance. So just so everyone knows, there is comorbidities with ADHD, high functioning autism, sensory processing disorders. There's comorbidities with other things. This is where this isn't bleeding into other areas. It's not bleeding into school. It's not as much. It's not bleeding into their development, their learning environment. It doesn't go into those disorders. It's more like we were saying, a personality trait. So it's just things they're dealing with. So I just want to put that out there that some of this stuff may sound like those other things, but highly sensitive people tend to be like high functioning. Does that resonate with you, Leah?
Yeah, I think these are the traits that the parents are wanting to look for that support. Because they're like, well, does my child have something? And should I have an evaluation just to either rule it out or rule it in? So so there's like I would say a level of where it does, not turn into, but where it would lead more into an ADD diagnosis but so they do hopefully get an evaluation and then get it ruled out. Be like, nope. They're just, have a low frustration tolerance. Let's learn some tools and then they'll be able to manage it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's possible to be highly sensitive and have ADHD. You can do both. But so the low frustration tolerance, like you were saying, is like when you encounter a challenge, your child encounters a challenge or something they can't figure out, are they able to move through the frustration without having a meltdown? And again, the younger they are, the harder it is for them to do this. But this is something that like you see prominently more often than you would expect. They tend to they can get through it, but it's really difficult for them. And again, this is something you can teach. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was perfectionism. This is a huge, not only for kids, but for moms, but for kids, it comes up in these strange ways where you're going to see them like avoiding doing things. Like they'll give up on something or they'll avoid it. Sometimes it's a frustration tolerance, but the perfectionism is more usually what it is. Like if they refuse to go to a sports activity or they refuse to try drawing something that they maybe haven't done before. A lot of times it's perfectionism because when you make a mistake as a highly sensitive person, your brain offers you lots of very mean bullying things. And so that creates shame. And then naturally as a child or as a mom, you're going to want to avoid that. You're going to be like, nope, I just want everything to to be perfect. I don't want to make a mistake because I don't want to feel those horrible things or listen to my brain make those horrible statements about me. And so we're very hard on ourselves as adults and as children. So perfectionism is a really big one, which leads to, again, being afraid to make a mistake. And that can also create emotional reactions too. You can get a lot of meltdowns over making mistakes. Or if you correct your child, this is another really big one. If you correct your child and they react really poorly, either they yell back at you, they get angry, or they shut down, that is a sensitive kid probably, because the criticism, even if it's not criticism, it's just feedback, it's going to feel awful. It's going to bring up that shame again. So there's like a through line here that we're bringing up, Leah, which is more about the shame than anything else. So so it's really important to remember that as a parent or as a highly sensitive mom, if you think you might be like, is there a strong sense of shame there that's sort of underlying some of the reactions your child is having? Because they will do anything to avoid it. They will do anything to avoid shame. So they will talk back, they will rebel, they will run away, they will shut down, they will melt down, they will do anything to avoid shame. And a lot of times that can look like a kid being a difficult child, or it can look like they're not listening or they're not complying. But in reality, underneath it, there's some emotional pain that they're feeling. And so
I have a quick question about that, because how I see it in my daughter, she's more people pleasing.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
At taking that side to it, because if she feels any slight of criticism, or if you look at her wrong, she might go and cry and run to her room. And then you're like, but I didn't even say much. But she was assuming there was a criticism behind there. But she'll also do a lot of things to be super helpful, to really kind of read us and know what we need already. And then do that to make sure that we're not, I don't know, even saying anything negative, but to get that praise, because there is a lot of praise in people pleasing, and just managing your environment so you don't feel that shame. You don't feel any criticism because you're doing everything right. So I already see it in her. And as a therapist, I'm like, no, but we're going to work on it.
It's very common for highly sensitive people to be people pleasing, which goes along with perfectionism. Like they almost seem the same. But I think people pleasing also comes with the reading the room and feeling the moods of everyone. Like maybe there's a tension with a fight or a conflict, and they're going to do everything in their power to stop that from happening. To like make sure people are happy, make sure people aren't in conflict or not even be in conflict themselves. Like don't bring stuff up to upset anyone. And I think that that's something that is really, really common, because conflict feels awful in highly sensitive people. Usually. I mean, some people aren't necessarily like that, but I think that's really true. And the idea is that the goal for you as the parent is to teach your child that like you can feel things and be okay. Like that's ultimately the goal. I didn't really understand that till I got much older in my life. And that's my goal now with my kids is like, hey, like it's normal that you're feeling this way. Totally makes sense. And just normalizing everything they feel so that they don't feel like they have to change anything or they have to fix anything or they have to avoid conflict because it doesn't feel great. And that's something that you have to practice. It's not something that, you immediately hear, hey, feelings are normal and it's okay that you feel this way. And then you're immediately fine. It's more about the practice around, hey, I felt that way. It wasn't great, but I made it through and I was okay. And at the end, something great came from it, or something actually semi-good. I felt good about myself, or I felt like I spoke up for myself. I had a voice, but sometimes that can take years and years and years to change.
It can. But if you start now when they're younger, then hopefully they'll have some of those practices in place. So as an adult, as a lot of my clients are people pleasers and perfectionistic moms, it's a lot harder when you're an adult. So learning now, then you'll already have a leg up for the rest of your life, really.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's much easier. The neuroplasticity is higher in kids. So you're able to change them or help them shift how they're dealing with things so much faster. Like my middle son, he gets so on edge. He's a very chill kid, but as soon as my husband and I start talking, we call it loudly agreeing, especially about like, things that we both are very passionate about. And we're just like talking about it. He gets very on edge and he's like, can you guys stop? Can you guys not do that? Can you lower your voices? Like that's what's going on. And I'm just like, we're okay, buddy. Like we're fine. And like being able to kind of show and model that is super big for your kids. And like for me, like even being able to model speaking up, which is something I've always had trouble with, or not letting people walk all over me kind of thing. Like, and just making sure my kids know that I'm working on it and it's not the end of the world when maybe someone isn't super happy with you. and
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
keep modeling that. But it can be really difficult, especially as an adult. I'm a people pleasing perfectionist recovering
Right.
myself. So
Right.
yeah.
It is. It is. And when you're able to teach your kids that and they're able to see the other side of it is not so bad, it builds confidence,
Hmm.
right? So the confidence through being assertive, standing up for themselves. And, even your son standing up for himself when he's saying, hey, please don't do that.
Yep.
It's
Mhm.
saying, hey, buddy, thanks for doing that. We're still all right. You're allowed to feel those feelings, but good job telling us.
Yeah, and I always do
Right.
recognize that in the kids. Like I want them to be able to
Mm-hmm.
speak up, which is one of the reasons why the parenting style I use is really about respecting your child and what they want and feel and need,
Mm-hmm.
because we want them to have a voice. We don't want them to have some sort of blind obedience to authority
Right.
that's not healthy. So yeah, so that definitely all kind of goes together with the highly sensitive kid. You need to help them, encourage them to feel valued and their
Mm-hmm.
opinion is valued, and speaking up is going to be a good thing for them, as opposed
Yes.
to they're going to get punished for it, which can be really difficult because sometimes when they speak up, it doesn't feel great for you. It's rude, or it's coming from a different place. So we'll talk about some of these more challenging emotional situations with your kids in future podcasts and get more
Yep.
in depth with them and make sure you all know how to handle these specific situations. But for today, we're just doing a nice general overview. And I did want to mention one more thing for kids. We did talk a little bit more about this with moms, but they have a
Mm-hmm.
very physical sensitivity to a lot of kids. And one of the biggest ones is picky eating. And this
Mm-hmm.
was me as a child. I ate basically like dairy and wheat. My daughter's the same way. I did a 180 in my 20s. So I know there's hope for most of us, but the picky eating can be very challenging for parents. I mean,
Yes.
horribly difficult. And what it is that you're just more sensory sensitive to
Mm-hmm.
textures as a highly sensitive kid. Some kids. Tags in clothing
Mm-hmm.
can be a big one. Like you're gonna see their kids like rejecting coats. Like, I don't want to wear that coat, it's too
Oh my
heavy.
gosh.
I don't want to wear those jeans because they're itchy or they're scratchy, or I don't like those leggings because of that seam. I don't like where that seam is on me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
put socks on. Like, I don't like socks. Here's a tip: inside out. Do them inside out. But the cool thing is, there's a lot out there now for kids that have these sensory sensitivities physically. You can even look up
Mm-hmm.
sensory sensitive clothing. Target has a whole brand of it. And there's just a lot more softer options out there. When we were growing up, there was nothing. And so some kids like have struggle with hunger. So like they get really hungry and they like get the hangry, or maybe they don't notice
Mm-hmm.
they're hungry. Maybe they don't notice if they're thirsty, or maybe they're overly thirsty. So it's like both ends of the spectrum are sensitive. One of the other things is like touching. So Leah and I were talking about how some kids like to have more pressure on their bodies. Like they like to be
Yes.
hugged. They like to be squeezed. They like people to lay on them. That's one of my kids. They
Mm-hmm.
like to have
Mm-hmm.
heavy blankets on them. Some kids like
Yep.
literally want you not to touch them at all. And that's my third is like that. He just like immediately will freak out if you squeeze him too hard. So it's like, it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see. You can have them on any spectrum, any side of the spectrum. It's just more the extremity of it, like the extremeness. And so, thinking about your kids, again, this is going to be something that they're going to really, really say a lot and not let you put pants on them, or not let you, it's not like they're just
Mm-hmm.
like one off. They have one piece of clothing
Right.
that bothers them, but it's more like a very consistent thing that you have to deal
Yes.
with all the time.
Yeah, my
So
13-year-old hasn't worn jeans, I think, since preschool, and no buttons on clothing either.
yeah, exactly. So you're going to
Right?
have some very specific things that they
Mm-hmm.
want. And it's all valid. That's the thing, as the parent, we have
Yep.
to recognize that they're not just doing this to be difficult. It literally is valid. And they feel these things very deeply. And they wouldn't be saying them if it really didn't bother them. And they're not just doing it to be a challenge. Like if I have a tag on my clothes that bothers me, or I'm wearing wool, oh my gosh, I can't focus on anything else. All I can think about is that little tag or that wool that's bothering me. And it's so over consuming and very, very uncomfortable. So that's what's
Mm-hmm.
happening for them. They can't focus on anything else, and it's physically
Mm-hmm.
painful. So is
Right.
there anything else you want to add to that, Leah, with the kids?
Going along with the pressure and the sensory, because I know with at least my son, if he doesn't have enough of the pressure and the sensory input, he can look dysregulated. He can wander around the house. He can start arguments because he's feeling dysregulated because of that sensory input. He hasn't had enough yet. So, from a very young age, teaching him to say, I need a hug before he starts acting out. It's, I need this. So there's times where he'll still, 13, squeeze me. I need to be squeezed.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, well, can I squeeze you? because he's bigger than me. I can't necessarily squeeze him as much, but it's knowing that, okay, yes, this is what you need. So then you can go and do something more focused.
Right. And
Right.
also you as a parent recognized that that was something
Yes.
that regulated him, which is something
Mm-hmm.
that I definitely work with when I work with my clients is like, okay, so your kid is acting this way. Let's figure out what happens right before it. Let's figure
Yes.
out what do they naturally do in their own setting to regulate
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Some kids will go upside down on the couch. Some kids will do
Oh.
tumbles. Like I had a kid, one of my kids would read books upside down on the couch. It was just the way that he
Mm-hmm.
was. He just regulated himself that way. One would roll, another would want to swing. So this is all physical movements. It doesn't necessarily have to be
Mm-hmm.
physical movement, but just like recognizing like what is your kid doing naturally to kind of help themselves self-regulate and then do more
Yes.
of that. Don't yell at them for doing it. Do
Right.
more of it.
Right. Right. So I think that takeaway is do what our kids need because it will regulate their nervous system. They're trying to regulate their nervous system naturally.
Exactly.
So even as moms, we need to regulate our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So, what maybe did we used to do as kids
Yeah.
that was really helpful? Swinging was very helpful for me, rocking. So, when can I do it now? Can I go on a swing with my kid to regulate myself? And they're going to be regulated.
Mm-hmm.
Going over and hugging my kids because I feel like I need a hug.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Hugs are really, really good. Helpful. Yeah. I had a client that her daughter would not stand still to brush her teeth. She would always dance, dance around the room, dance around the hallway. And then it took them forever to get her to get ready for bed. And I said, okay, she's clearly doing this to regulate herself. Let's just incorporate it into the routine. So then what we do is we have one thing she does, then she does a 5-minute dance break. And then she does the next task. And then she does another 5-minute dance break. And the mom was like, it completely changed everything. She actually was calm enough that she had these fears about things in her room. She stopped being afraid of some of them. So it's really all about reading your kid and trying to figure out what do they need to be regulated and helping them recognize it and use it. It really does work. So I'm really glad that you figured that out with your kids because that's really helpful. We're going to talk about the one last thing, which is why is it important to know if you/your kids, you and your kids are highly sensitive? And we have talked about this already. I think we're just going to sort of summarize, so I know with Leah, the biggest part for you was the shame piece. So do you want to talk about why that's important?
Yeah, because shame is very helpful to a point. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to break laws. We don't want to do certain things that make us bad. But when it creeps into everyday situations, everyday decisions, and we become paralyzed by our shame, then nothing gets done. And we're just in this constant inner critic spiral that isn't helping anyone. And we also don't want it to leak out to our kids because we can inadvertently say something about ourselves that our kids hear and they think, well, that's how I'm supposed to talk to myself. No, we want to change it for ourselves so we can help them change it for themselves. So by connecting with others, finding support, learning that this is how you are, this is how you're wired, and it's wonderful, and finding the strengths, which I feel like you do a lot in your work. It's finding the strengths of, being highly sensitive and using them. You'll learn that I can do this. There is nothing wrong with me. I'm wonderful, and so are my kids. So if I'm able to find my strengths, I can find it in them. So they also won't struggle as much.
Right. So knowing that you're highly sensitive helps relieve the shame of feeling that there's something wrong when you have the experiences of these sensitivities or these challenges or this overstimulation or the anxiety, right? So then it's like, oh, nothing's wrong with me. I am just highly sensitive. And now I can move forward with figuring out how to help myself and work with some tools that might make things more easy for me in my life or make me feel more emotionally healthy. With kids, you can also learn what the cause is. Like if you know your child's highly sensitive, you know that they're going to act certain ways, possibly depending on their sensitivities because of an emotional cause or a physical cause. So like I was saying, if you have a kid that's really sensitive to tags and they're melting down or throwing a fit because you won't change their clothes or they need to get it off, you can understand, oh, this is valid. They're really struggling. Like they're not making this up to be difficult. And then you can be calmer around them. You can feel better about working with them and you're not always reacting to what they're dealing with. And if you know your kid's having a
Right.
meltdown because you put blueberries on the table and they are really food sensitive and that gives them anxiety, okay, now we don't need to put blueberries on the table until they're ready. And then we reduce sort of this like huge meltdowns all the time. And we don't want to avoid all of that. It's just a matter of understanding the causes and being able to purposefully expose them in a very meticulous sort of planned out way where they're aware and you're aware. That's getting into more anxiety related things. But just thinking about the fact that, oh, my kid's anxious and she's not rude, even though when she's anxious, she says things that sound rude. So then you're going to completely react differently to a kid that's rude to you because they're anxious versus they're rude to you because I don't believe kids are rude to be rude. So it's kind of hard to say, but you're going to know why they're rude, right? This idea of, oh, if I validate her now and say, hey, but it sounds like you're really nervous about X, Y, or Z, the anxiety is going to disappear, or the rudeness is going to disappear, and she's just going to talk to me like a normal person. So understanding why your kids are doing what they're doing, if they're highly sensitive, is going to help you stay calm around your child and also parent them in a way that actually works to help them understand themselves and to reduce some of those unwanted behaviors. So that's one of the things that we want to think about in regards to labeling. We'll talk about this in another podcast too. How are we labeling our children, even in our own minds or out loud? That might be not helpful. And how can we switch that? So we'll talk about that in the future. So is there anything else that you wanted to add about why it's important to know if you're highly sensitive?
Yeah, I think at the relabeling and being able to reframe our own behaviors and reframe our children's behaviors, we're able to live a lot more intentionally. And that brings in more awareness of what we're doing, why we're doing, and it helps us live more a fulfilled life, a calmer life, a more peaceful life. And I think that's the goal for all of us.
Exactly. Yeah. So the knowledge is power around it. And so the next couple episodes, we're going to give you more specifics on how to work with some of these different issues in regards to moms and kids both. And we are hoping that we will see you in 2 weeks when our next episode drops. In the meantime, though, you can find Leah and me on social media. My Instagram is Adrienne Bishop Coaching, and Leah's Instagram is Leah Andreoni. And we will see you soon. Thanks so much.